Welcome to Order Militarist Radio TV. We're lifelong Catholics, and what we do is all for free, and for our love of Jesus Christ, and for our Holy Mother, the Church. We'll defend our Holy Mother, the Church. And we're with Brother Alexis Bonolo on episode 2, where Jack Ryan is making his life choices. And before we begin, we have now the permission of the author, Daniel P. Sullivan, to use the book and to investigate what happened to Jack Ryan. And we want to thank the author for allowing us to do this. And welcome, brother.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on Order Militaris Radio TV. And I am finding the life of Jack Ryan absolutely fabulous and interesting. And I encourage everyone to get a copy of this book. We Catholics should know about the Catholic heroes of the United States, even if their life ended in tragedy. And when we get to the murder of Jack Ryan, we're going to give you our own opinion about it from all the information we've already delved into here at Order Militaris Radio TV. But now we're in the we're following the life of Jack Ryan and how he becomes the international Catholic hero that he was.
Yeah.
In those days in which everyone trusted the government and no one thought, there was anything really malign going on.
Yeah.
My father often said, he goes, something happened after the Second World War. America was so bright and optimistic, but something after the Second World War changed that. And he never quite could put his finger on it, but now we know it's Operation Paperclip.
Mm-hmm.
It's the recruiting of the Nazi evil spy network into the United States. And Jack didn't know that. Most Catholics didn't know it. Kennedy didn't know it. And if you didn't know it, you could end up dead.
Yeah.
Now we're going to talk about Jack's transition from childhood to manhood and how he quickly made really good decisions in life, and that were based on his strong family values, his Catholic values, and his patriotism.
Yeah.
And so he's a wonderful example to young people out there, if you're listening to us, who are on the brink of manhood or adulthood, womanhood. Modern world tells you, don't make any decision until your 30s or 40s. That's propaganda. A well-formed Catholic will make the decisions as soon as he's out of high school.
So Jack Ryan was completing his junior year at John Marshall High School in Minneapolis, as his parents made plans for the family's voyage to France in 1938. Tall, dark, and quiet, he posed in the back of the yearbook photos, with the exception of one in which he stood at the front of the school orchestra while directing a performance of Anton Rubinstein's Melody in F. He played the bass viol, an instrument similar to a cello, in the orchestra when he wasn't conducting. He had also served as secretary of the French club, an easy chore for a native speaker and a means of brushing up on the language ahead of the family's summer trip. An undistinguished athletic career was coming to an end. He had dropped out of football after 1 year and wasn't planning to return to run track for his senior year.
So yeah, Jack was interested more in music and not in sports like his brother, George. So he graduates in 19... Oh, so why is he going to France in the summer? Let's remind everyone.
Yeah. So Jack and George has a French mother, Georgette, and he has grandparents in Nugent, France, near Paris, and so they're going to go back to see them and enjoy a summer vacation with the family there.
And to do that in 38, you weren't poor. My parents were dirt poor in 38, poor Italian immigrants. So, but her parents in France were business people, and so they had some money. So this was like one of the last summers of peace in Europe. And it was a decisive moment for the change of history in Europe. Do we have any information on what they did that summer?
Yeah, so Georgia and the boys left for France without Ed in June 1938. traveling by bus to New York and spending a couple of days sightseeing in the city before boarding the French ocean liner SS de France. Jack took on the role of Ed, fidgeting and checking his watch as the ship missed its designated departure time while still at the dock. Once the ship finally pulled away from the shore, he took out his father's movie camera and began filming as they passed the Statue of Liberty. The Lake de France was modern marvel for the teenage Jack and George. It had been first ocean liner decorated in Art Deco style when it launched in 1926 and was popular with Americans traveling to France. The brothers wandered about, both together and separately, but not playing deck games or attending movies in the ship auditorium. On the morning of their seventh day, they spotted England off the port bow and docked that evening at Le Havre on the northern coast of France. They were met by George's sister, Denise, a student in Paris, who hosted them for a day, along with sister Yvonne. From there, they headed south to stay with George's brother, Andre. Jack and George were unenthusiastic about their time at Andre's home, about 25 miles from the grandparents' home in Nogent-sur-Seine, since much of it was spent helping their uncle paint his house. By the time July 4th arrived, Jack was wishing he was back in America.
That's the French that put the kids to work. So that was quite an experience. In modern times, almost none of us have an experience of traveling on a big ship, and it's not even like a cruiser ship. I don't know of it personally, but my own parents traveled back and forth to Europe on ship when it was still in vogue. Planes basically put them out of business, but it was an event. The ships often left late from port in New York because they had to make sure that everyone who had bought a ticket got on board, and that everyone on board had a ticket, because relatives would come on board to say goodbye and kiss, and people who were very loving and close back then, to see their relatives go off just for a few months brought them to tears and hugs, embraces, and kisses, and people valued life more. They didn't presume that there wouldn't be tragedies and stuff. And well, war was in the air in Europe. The Germans in the spring of '38 had taken the Sudetenland off of Czechoslovakia. So people were doing things, but it was an event. You had thousands of people around these ships on the docks, crowding one another and pushing their way in, and they gave you little thingies you could throw from the windows of the boat, streamers and stuff. It was quite an event. So for kids, it must have been unforgettable. The travel on that ship and stuff.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So Ed's absence was felt in many ways, but particularly when it came to disciplining George. Jack was angry with his brother after being locked in his room by him. And the younger boy was slapped by George at lunch one day when he misbehaved. Everyone was more than ready to return to Paris after 2 weeks of work, short tempers, and a string of rainy days. They arrived back at the Gare de Lyon railway terminal and took a taxi to a small hotel in northwest Paris that would be the temporary home in the French capital. The next day, Bastille Day, Georgette took the boys to the Avenue des Champs-Élysées to watch a military parade celebrating the turning point of the French Revolution and serving as a show of force against the threat of Nazi Germany. She bought cardboard periscopes to watch over the crowd as cavalry, tanks, and soldiers, marching 24 abreast, passed by. Ed arrived 2 days later in time to celebrate her birthday. Jack began to roam Paris on his own, swimming up the Champs-Élysées on his way to the Invalides, a site glorifying France's military history that includes Napoleon's tomb. Armed with his fluent French, he became quite comfortable on the streets of the giant city.
that must have been a sight to see for the kids. A few military parade, and the military parade at '38 was one of the last large French military parades, because, well, the year later the war would break out, and the year after that France would be defeated in a stunning blitzkrieg by Nazi Germany. So But these are really informative events for young men to see the world, because none of their classmates probably ever went to France, and to see a military parade of a foreign army.
Yeah. So Ed was there. They were enjoying sightseeing and lodgings, and Ed went up to the Alpine Resort and visited the war in near Hannibal's Pass and picked flowers for Georgette. She still had them pressed and dried 20 years later. And Ed wanted to go on a family souvenir shopping day, but Jack declined and decided to go off on his own way. Nevertheless, Jack enjoyed a full summer immersed in French language and exposed to a broad view of the world beyond Minneapolis. France had provided more than a family vacation. The experience would shape the rest of his life, and just as it had his father's. Jack returned for his final year at Marshall High School with full plate of activities. Awaiting him was a second year as student director of the school's orchestra, with George playing under his baton. More importantly for Jack, when he took his place in the string section, he met Bonnie Niblin, a pretty red-headed violinist who would be transferred from Central High School for a senior year. They soon were dating. He had a full schedule through his senior year, writing for the Cardinal yearbook staff and for the Judge newspaper under his friend editor-in-chief Bob Murchie. The two also had participated together in French Club and the Inner Circle, a club that aimed to broaden the cultural background for the high school senior by featuring speakers from the University of Minnesota, local businesses, institutions of art. Jack's schedule grew even busier when he was chosen for one day of the lead roles of the school production of Tovarich, a comedy about Russian nobility who fled their homeland after the revolution in 1917.
Well, it was a really active senior year in high school, and that gave him a lot of command character qualities for command roles, and you could see he's already fleshing that out. And this is what young men should do in high school. And unfortunately, in most places in modern America, you're so far away from high school. In rural towns, you got to be bussed in and out that you never get involved in edifying social activities at high school. And those are very important. And that's what keeps kids occupied, doing something honest and upright, and not just lounging around doing nothing.
Yeah. By graduation day, Jack and Bonnie had gotten serious enough in the relationship that the yearbook reported in Senior Legacies that Bonnie Niblin leaves her doorstep to Jack Ryan. In the senior section, Jack was listed with the nickname Romeo, which he crossed out when he signed her yearbook. He wrote in the back, "Dearest Bonnie, may you always stay as sweet as you are. Love, Jacques." George doused the romance by signing beneath Jack's signature. Bonnie might have had Jack's attention in the orchestra, but she wasn't a distraction to his high school career. He was named the most accomplished boy in his class and received a scholarship to attend a national music camp at the Interlochen, Michigan in 1939. The classes were taught by distinguished musicians, including Walter Damrosch of the New York Symphony, who had conducted the first performance of George Gershwin's An American in Paris. Jack completed the 2-month course, then traveled to New York with the other students to perform a series of concerts at the World Fair.
Oh, really? Okay, so he had been to New York and he had been to the World Fair before. This is going to be, New York is going to turn out to be an important moment in Jack's life, as we see at the end. So this was really an outstanding young man, and upright, accomplished, talented, gregarious, like the Irish normally are, but not always. Well-mannered. You don't see him getting involved in drunks or getting drunk or in drugs. You don't see him having a child out of wedlock. He was a man who had a lot of self-control and dedicating himself to honest and upright endeavors. And that's especially unique for the fact that he was a musician. A lot of people get in music and they think, well, I'm in a band so I can get drunk, use drugs, and, you know, sleep with my girlfriend or several girlfriends. And that's just totally false. That's not the Catholic or Christian or upright way of using your talents. So he was.
Yeah.
What does he do after his summer music camp in '39?
They graduate, and both him and Bonnie enter the University of Minnesota. And it was in 1939 that Germany had invaded Poland. The world was again at war. U.S. Congress passed the Neutrality Act in 1939 that fall, forbidding U.S. ships from entering war zones, so war's impact on Americans was modest at first. So Jack and Bonnie continued to date after they entered University of Minnesota. Jack's academic success in high school didn't carry over into his freshman year at the University of Minnesota. While he received A's in French and music, he struggled in logic and economic courses. He signed up for ROTC drill for the spring semester of his freshman year, as his grandparents in Nogent watched a German war machine moving relentlessly towards them. Grandfather Georges Leo Cornet wrote in late February 1940 that his grocery business was suffering because American ships were no longer arriving in French harbors. The civilians lack everything, he wrote. No coffee, oil, soap, cocoa, tea, and chocolate, and a multitude of other articles that we cannot get. But that concern was minor compared to the fear of the Germans, who, as he wrote, were within 250 miles of his home, waiting for a spring thaw to resume their push toward Paris. There is only one thing that we are afraid of at the moment, the general outbreak of the war and the bombings, George wrote. I think we will soon see something terrible. We don't dare to think about it in advance. Not long afterward, the Leonid letters stopped. Jack completed his ROTC class at the time Paris fell to the Nazis in June 1940. The events in France and their effects on his French relatives must have weighed heavily on him as he signed up for classes for sophomore year. He continued in ROTC, moving up to the crack drill squad in the Pershing Rifles, which was organized like the U.S. Army unit and named after General John J. Pershing. He took more intense French classes, including advanced conversation.
So that brings him to the year 1940-41 academic year.
Mm-hmm. So he and Bonnie continued to date, although the romance took a hiatus in the summer of 1940 when she went on a 5-week dating tour to Montana. She also had taken screen tests in Hollywood when she was accompanied her mother Beatrice Niven, a talented artist who did work for the movie studios in California. As Jack and Bonnie began their sophomore year at the university in September, Marshall High School friend Bob Murchie was enlisting in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Murchie had been born in Winnipeg but moved to Minneapolis area when his father took a position as a professor of economics at the University of Minnesota. He had learned to fly at age 14 and already had logged more hours flying than was necessary to win his wings. He wrote Bonnie just before Christmas of 1940 from Canada and said he was enjoying the service. Before I got in, I used to worry about, will I like it? Or what will they do to poor little, sweet little innocent me? He wrote to her. Well, I'm still in one piece, healthier and better off than I've been for a dog age. I'll probably end up a corpse one of these days, but there's no future in worrying about that. He expressed some disappointment that he hadn't met any woman, and asked suggestively, "Do you see, Jack?" And added, "Foolish question, isn't it?"
Foolish question. Yes. Does his friend Mercy eventually get sent over to Britain for the Battle of Britain?
Yeah.
Did he survive the war?
Nope.
Poor guy. God rest his soul.
So, like the rest of America, Twin Cities residents were anxiously watching the war in Europe.
Mhm.
With the holiday season approaching, Bonnie had received an envelope of the official Royal Canadian Air Force stationery. Inside was a Christmas card from Murchie, who was stationed in England. He didn't write a message, but instead just signed the card and passed along best wishes for Christmas and New Year. While his friend flew dangerous missions in Europe, 20-year-old Jack was considering his own commitment to duty, instilled from the lessons of the Ryan clan that had carved out a new life in the Minnesota soil. He also had been molded by father's Ed's lectures that success lay in education, ambition, and hard work, along with his mother, Georgette's worldly view and the grace of her culture. But the Jack Ryan heading off to class at the University of Minnesota in early December 1941 had yet to be shaped by what lay ahead after Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
Okay, so you want to cover that in this episode? Or we'll do that in his next?
We can continue if you have time.
Yeah, I have time. So how did the news of Pearl Harbor affect Jack? We know.
So Jack was one of a million of young men and women who answered the call when America went to war in 1941. They were flung into faraway places and new roles, unexpected adventures. The people they became if they survived, often lay in what fate had offered during the war years. Jack completed his semester at University of Minnesota after Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and volunteered for the U.S. Army Air Forces, as the nation's air branch was known at the time. The news was sobering in America's first days of the war, with setbacks in the Philippines and Singapore in the weeks following Pearl Harbor. Personal news dealt much worse blow for Jack and Bonnie Niben. Bob Murchie, their John Marshall High School classmate and friend, was shot down and killed on February 27, 1942, while taking part in a commando raid at Bruinville, on the northwest coast of France. His night fighter had provided air support as 120 British commandos parachuted into France to capture a German raider station and escaped across the channel by boat with equipment and two captured soldiers. While it wouldn't be known until later, the mission in which Murchie died allowed the Allies to develop means for their bombers to evade the detection by German radar. In addition, Germans heightened their defenses around radar stations after the raid, and the heavy use of barbed wire made them more visible to reconnaissance planes.
Now, this is an amazing little event here that his friend who died in the service of Canada was involved in a special operations raid. And that's quite amazing. These young people were really excellent examples of patriotism in their own countries. They were really great men, and that takes a lot of courage, to go to one of those in a special operations run. And the night flighting the fact that they trusted him with a night mission showed that they had absolute confidence in his flying abilities. It's very difficult to fly at night.
Yeah. Ed already left for FBI training in Washington when Jack boarded a train at the Great Northern Railway Depot, Minneapolis, on June 13, 1942. Destined for boot camp at Santa Ana Army Air Base in California, he traveled with fellow Marshall High alum Bud Blund, and they celebrated their good luck. All the train cars were Pullmans with sleeping compartments. Jack settled into the lower bunk and dashed off a quick postcard to his mother. He closed. With a swell bunch of fellows. Dit bonjour à George, love, Jacques. About a week later, he took his physical for flight training at Santa Ana and was pleased that it went well, with the exception of his weight, which was 5 pounds under the minimum. It wouldn't necessarily keep him from flying, though he was told to go on a high-calorie diet to add pounds.
Okay, and so he had to give up his French habits of eating.
So, yeah, so they don't say that he wrote to his Irish family, but I'm pretty sure he did.
Get that corned beef and brisket, potatoes and cabbages that they love eating this Irish. So
So
cornbread.
Santa Ana was an airbase name only. It lacked runways, hangars, and planes, and was used exclusively for boot camp. 5,000 men were at the base by June 1942, just 6 months after Pearl Harbor, even though barracks were still under construction. It had nothing.
Just because it shows you have men and materials, you can build a base.
Yep.
And it's interesting to note that not only he signed up, but his father signed up to join the FBI, even though he was just a policeman in Minneapolis. So it was a very patriotic family.
Yeah. Jack decided to use his free time to write to his father. He was staying at a private home in Washington's Crestwood area while attending the FBI Academy. Another month, most you'll be almost through, Jack wrote. Mom will certainly be glad to have you back with her again. I wish that I could be home when you do come home. However, I have a job to do here first. Home will still be there when this war is over.
A lot of confidence. That's a wonderful kind of a letter to write to your mom. So why did Jack join the Air Force? Had he already had some flight experience? Or was he impressed by his friend Mercer?
I think it was his friend.
Mm-hmm.
Because he had no idea about flying. He was like, I'm on the ground type,
That's true friendship and that's true admiration.
So, so Georgette didn't wait for Ed to come home. She traveled over there to the East Coast to be with Ed and got to meet the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, and and at Santa Ana Air Base, Jack applied for classification as a pilot, although he was willing to settle for bombardier or navigator, so long as he got in the air. Pilot candidates were already washing out left and right at Santa Ana because of physical shortcomings, discipline, and failure in classwork. He felt bad for them while remaining hopeful of his own chances, largely because of his ROTC training at the University of Minnesota. Some of the washouts still could join flight crews and meet the goal of getting into the air, but others would be assigned to ground crews, and still others would end up in the infantry. He was left less confident about a month into training. First off, he lost his billfold while on the first pass away from the base, and with it, his military ID and pass. The discipline was minimal, but it came at a poor time for someone under scrutiny. In addition, his head was swimming in the instruction that accompanied pilot training. While he was finding individual courses manageable, the total workload was overwhelming. He especially dreaded the physics course that packed an entire year of college curriculum into 18 class hours. Cadets were expected to learn as much about the theory of flight and electronic communications as they were about how to actually operate a plane in the air. If you drop a pencil in class, you've missed 2 weeks of college physics, by the time you get it picked up, you deserve. He had taken no science classes at the University of Minnesota and mathematics only as far as trigonometry. So the Army classes in math and code were challenging. Courses such as plane and ship identification, military history, and military law completed the load. Testing followed each class period. By August, the cadets had moved into newly constructed barracks, improving life considerably at the dusty Barron Santa Ana base. But a short time later, they were transferred to Calero Academy at Ontario, California.
Okay, so boy, yeah, if you have to pick up all those sciences and topics all at once, it'd be quite challenging, especially since your expertise is only in music or languages.
Yes, the Academy had been an independent flying school that received a contract from the Army Air Forces at the outset of World War II and used as private instructors to provide initial training for the cadets. Jack wasn't impressed with his civilian teachers. Many of them are the south end of horse going north, he wrote to his dad. He began picking up a camera and began sending pictures to Bonnie, who started a scrapbook on his military service. She noted Fat Jack on one photo taken after he had made his minimum weight. Another was simply labeled Romeo. Jack also sent along proof that he had been attending mass at the base. The two had been dating for about 4 years and were talking about marriage as the 1942 holiday season was underway. Bonnie sent a Christmas card to him at the Calero with the verse, "Always said I'd never be the kind who'd fall so hard, that I would ever go out and buy a sentimental card. Ah, yes, I used to say all that, sweetheart, before I knew the one I'd fall in love with was someone sweet like you." She accepted Jack's proposal in December and began trying to arrange a date for the wedding around his training schedule. And then finally, around that same month, George finally graduated John Marshall High School, despite a few activities in his social life. Yeah. And we won't go into the letter Ed sent to George because it was very colorful. Jack arrived in January at the Army Air Force's Advanced Training School in Roswell, New Mexico. Measured in at 6 feet and a half inch tall and 146 pounds, 1 pound over the minimum for his height. He was promoted from aviation cadet to second lieutenant. With an overseas posting nearing, Bonnie traveled to Roswell with her parents and his sister Betty, and married Jack on March 8, 1943. Both were 21 years old. Georgette came alone because Ed was unable to cancel a series of speaking engagements.
From the Feast of St. Thomas Aquinas, March 8th, the old calendar.
Yep. So, see here.
That shows real devotion. She traveled halfway across the country, or a third of the way across the country with the family for the wedding.
And let me see if I can get this photo up here. I can share this photo, the wedding photo.
On my end, AJ, your video's frozen. Has my video frozen on your end?
No, I mean,
Okay.
Just experiencing technical difficulties here, folks. Let me check. Stop. Oh, there we go.
Now I've lost your video.
Yeah.
As long as the video is getting to the recording platform.
Yeah, it's getting recorded.
Okay. So it's probably just on my end, although I don't see why I'm having a problem. It's a nice day here.
There we go. It's coming back, folks. It should be coming back. Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just going to disconnect my camera for a little bit, folks. We still have sound and we're still recording. And
Yeah, here we go. I see you now.
let me turn my background back on. Oh, okay.
Okay. So they got married on March 8th, 1943.
Yep.
And they were training him quite a long time, you know. He's been there a whole year training to be a pilot. I'm surprised they gave him so much training, but that's because he didn't have. Oh, that's the couple. That's the couple. Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw it just a moment. It did come through for 2 of your attempts.
Yeah.
So a handsome couple. I was surprised when you tell me his height and his weight. You know, because I'm only 5'10" and a half, and I weigh a lot more than he does. But he must had Irish. He must have been skinny and light of frame, which probably why they chose him
Yeah.
as a pilot, because you can't be too heavy to be a pilot.
So 2 days after the wedding, the oath was administered to Jack and about 300 other airmen at the graduation ceremony, promoting him from aviation cadet to the rank of second lieutenant. The event ended with the rousing redemption of the Army Air Corps song, also known as the Wild Blue Yonder.
Okay.
Georgia noticed the sad looks among the airmen who had no family to witness their big moment and vowed she would save enough money to attend George's graduation ceremony as well. I'll pin your wings on boy. When you get yours, he wrote to her younger son. Bonnie traveled with Jack to the next short stops in his training bases in Salt Lake City, Utah, and Boise, Idaho, where he was assigned to B-17 Flying Fortress with a heavy bomber group. He then left for Rapid City Air Base in late March for his final 2 months of bomber instruction. Flight training was nearly as deadly as air combat. The planes had been hastily constructed under government contracts. Most models would undergo multiple revisions by the end of the war. They were then put into the hands of young men with little experience in handling difficulties that arose while in the air.
Yeah, and most people, I think the B-17 was still made of wood. I don't even think it had a metal outer hull. Those only at the end of the war they started putting metal on the outer hulls of the planes.
Not long after Jack and 8 crewmates encountered problems during B-17 training flight out of Rapid City, Jack and 3 others bailed out from the plane while the pilot and 4 others decided to try to land in the rye field west of the airbase. The B-17 crashed and burst into flames as nearby farm family ran toward it. 2 injured men were pulled from the burning wreckage and taken to a hospital where they later died. 3 others could not be reached by the time an emergency crew from the base arrived, and they perished inside the plane's fuselage. Jack and others who bailed out were able to parachute to safety, but the survivors were allowed no time to recover mentally from the experience. He and his home, he and Bombardier Lieutenant Wayne Radar from Oregon were assigned to another B-17 and back in the air together soon afterward, reflecting on both the urgency of training and the fact that crashes were so common.
Yeah, that is one thing you see in all the films about the great pilots of the Second and First World War. They almost had to have icy steel characters. They were not people who took weeks to get over a tragedy. They got over it in an hour or two. It shows they have very strong character that young people don't have today because they waste their youth playing video games and doing silly things and not actually acquiring talents for the future.
Yeah. So the newlyweds' time together was nearing an end. Bonnie followed Jack to his next posting at Salina, Kansas, but in June he was ordered to Bangor, Maine, the last stop before flying overseas. She returned to Minneapolis to live with her parents, having no idea when he would return.
Okay, so as they're going down the road in western Kansas, she probably said something like, "They're going to make a radio TV program about you someday." I didn't have TV yet. A radio program. He said, "Nah, that's ridiculous. That's about as ridiculous as firing a radio station along this road in this cornfield."
Yeah. 379's initiation to war was harsh. 4 aircraft were lost in the first mission. 3 over the target and 1 had crashed at the base upon its return, a stark warning of difficult tasks that lay ahead. The second air operation fared even worse. An attack on Germany's northern coastline saw 6 more aircraft lost and heavy casualties among the surviving planes, making the unit's entry into the war one of the bloodiest for any 8th Air Force group. On 1379's B-17 pilot, Lieutenant Kermit D. Wooldridge wrote in his diary after returning from a mission over Germany in June 1943. They started throwing plenty of lead at me and a new type of rocket that would explode and scatter, a bunch of high explosive missiles that would also explode. About this time, another group of enemy planes appeared overhead and started dropping aerial bombs on us, meaning the bombers were flying their mission, and the Germans were dropping bombs on top of the bombers.
Yeah, the P-17s were not deployed well right in the beginning. They didn't have fighter accompaniment. They were flying during the daytime. They were just like geese being shot out of the sky, and they suffered very heavy losses.
Yeah. When Jack landed in England in early July, the 379th was in the midst of this daunting summer workload that would earn it a distinguished unit citation. By the end of the war, the group would drop more bombs, 25,479 tons, and would fly more missions than any American bomber group. He cabled Ed in Georgia upon his arrival. All well arrived, safely going to school. Write often, give love to Bonnie. Jack's first action was on July 24th, mission to Norway, to bomb a plant operated by Germans that produced nitrate for explosives. 180 B-17s flew against only light resistance. Just 1 American plane was lost. It was the 8th Air Force first raid on occupied Norway. The 379 scrambled to piece together its operations in England, dealing with losses of bombers and personnel, at the same time assembling newly arriving airmen and planes. Jack, Bombardier Wayne Radar, and ball turret gunner Tom Jackson, who had trained together in Rapid City, were assigned to several missions that were canceled at the last minute. 2 other times they took off aboard planes bound for German targets, only to be forced to return with engine trouble. There are no atheists on B-17s, Jack reflected later.
Yes, and one of those tail gunners in a B-17 went on to become a bishop, Rene Henry Gracida of San Antonio, of Corpus Christi, Texas. He was a gunner. He wasn't a pilot though, so he was defending guys like Jack who were co-pilots. And Jack didn't have such an easy career. He ends up getting shot down. We can get to that.
Yeah, that'll be episode 3.
Okay, so that it's really adventurous. What happens when Jack is shot down over occupied France?
Yep.
And this guy's life is like a movie unrolling, you know. And did they ever make a movie about Jack Ryan, the real Jack Ryan?
No.
Okay, so maybe this book will give generation to that. And thank you, AJ, for having me on this program about the making of Jack Ryan and his patriotism, his manhood, his self-control, his generosity. Really wonderful example of a Catholic from the United States.
Yep. This is Watermelon Terrace Radio TV signing off. There's Volt.
There's Volt.